Hey everyone, I'm NornQueenAlexis and welcome back to the channel and welcome Lore Master Sotek.
Hello.
Hello! How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am tired, but I'm pretty sure that's part of my personality at this point.
I know that feel.
Yeah, right? It's amazing. No, I dug through the trenches and everything and finally broke free of 40K's grip and decided to start indulging myself in more AOS content. And for those of you that don't know, AOS stands for Age of Sigmar. I know, 40K fans are probably like, what is that? The Promised Land? The place where they have better models, a better rule set? I am gonna make the joke.
Fine by me.
So. With the rise in AOS and how it's becoming more and more popular thanks to its beautiful model range, especially with the new Bellacore that just got released, and with the Daughters of Cain, which I am absolutely infatuated with, I decided that I wanted to learn more about the universe itself, and who better than, well, you.
Hopefully not too many people, otherwise I might be out of a job.
Yeah, fair. And so I thought I would ask you a bunch of lore questions about AOS and see what I can learn out of it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I know that the universe started off with a big bang and everybody cried because Warhammer Fantasy, which was a dead game, died.
We'll agree to disagree, but continue.
And the Tomb Kings and the Bretonnians are like the only armies out of there to not make it into the new edition.
Well, I would argue that the Ossiarch Bone Reapers are the new Tomb Kings, but Bretonnians are definitely do not have a true descendant yet.
Yeah. So explain to me that what happened, like that explosion. Like I know the orcs fought their way against non-existence and won somehow. I know that Slaanesh got captured, tortured, and started being eaten by other gods, and Kayla Morathi Kane became Morathi giant snake form by absorbing some of Slaanesh's essence. I know Slaanesh now has two offspring. So my lore is all over the place. So start from the beginning.
I'm going to kind of TLDR us really hard up to Broken Realms. And the big TLDR is that the world exploded, a bunch of shenanigans happened, and Chaos managed to grab victory from the jaws of defeat kind of at the last second. Chaos kind of started to lose because Archaon got his butt whooped by Sigmar in the final duel, and the heroes were about to save the day, and then Manfred von Karstein stabbed Balthazar Gelt in the back, and everything kind of wound out of control, and the world imploded after it basically got eaten by the realm of chaos. So world blows up, and all of the elements of the world that was kind of scattered to the winds like stardust when a star explodes, except for the stardust was magic, and the magic starts to coalesce to similar forms of magic, which in fantasy we had the 8 winds of magic, and those then coalesced into the 8 realms of magic. And the individuals who during the end times, there was an event where the winds of magic essentially got unleashed in their full power, and there were a set of individuals who were able to take most of those winds into themselves and became what are known as the incarnates. So this was like Alariel the Everqueen, Tyrion had the wind of light, Sigmar took the wind of heavens, Grimgor Ironhide had the wind of beasts, etc. And Ungrim, the Slayer King of the Dwarves, had the Wind of Fire. And when the mortal realms got created, thousands, if not millions of years later, we don't know how big of the time gap was, those incarnates woke up and now they're gods, or as close to... They claim they're gods. Whether or not they're gods is a matter of debate among some characters within the universe. But they claim to be gods, and they have a ton of power. And they are basically the incarnate embodiments of these 8 realms. And some of the ones moved around a little bit. So like Grimgor Ironhide died, but the god he worshipped Gork and Mork combined into Gorkamorka, who's now the god of beasts. And then even though Gorkamorka isn't really the playable sort of god, but now he's got Kragnos stepping in for him, which a lot of people, myself included, are super excited for, coming up in the last Broken Realms book. But you had all these realms form, and a bunch of shenanigans went down pretty quickly during what we know as the Age of Myth, which was that Sigmar, who was one of the only people to escape the world exploding, the way he got away was he basically felt Archaon superhero movie tackled him off a cliff, and they both went falling into an abyss. Archaon got snatched up by the dark gods, and Sigmar kept falling until he literally hit the core of the planet, which was a giant golden sphere. And when the world blew up, it went hurtling off into space with him on it, though he was dead for all intents and purposes. And he stayed dead until Dracothian found him. Dracothian resurrects him, and the two of them become bros, and Dracothian decides to show him the mortal realms. And Sigmar starts exploring it. He finds all the other gods who are either asleep or just have recently woken up on their own, and he forms a new pantheon. He makes some maybe not great decisions, like awakening Nagash, when he probably should have just left him there. But they form a new...
want Bone Daddy Nagash back in the lore?
Oh, I love Nagash. I'm actually Team Nagash in AOS, despite the fact Lizardmen are technically my favorite army. But Sigmar awakening him was from a... If you're not trying to just set yourself up for a long-term backstab, probably not the best guy to wake up. It's like Nagash's favorite thing in the universe is to eventually try and seize power from everyone around him.
But He-Man, you did not expect me to do this. Get stabbed. Actually, I did. Still get stabbed. Damn it.
Yeah, especially because I'm pretty sure Nagash is still mad about the fact that Sigmar killed him in the world that was already once before. Nagash is not exactly the forgiving type.
Before. That is a sentence that is going to haunt my nightmares.
But in the Age of Myth, we saw a lot of shenanigans happen. Like Morathi came back early on. She was actually one of the first people to come back in the Age of Myth, and she ended up finding Malarian in the Realm of Shadow. Morathi's case was actually really interesting because during the end times, Morathi played a rather critical role in destroying what was known as the Vortex, which is what kept the winds of magic getting pumped out of the world so demons couldn't manifest as easily. Morathi helped destroy the Vortex, and in kind of a moment of insanity after Tyrion, Morathi in fantasy was very heavily defined by her love for her former husband, Anarion, the first Phoenix King. And Anarion was not the best guy when she married him. She was his second wife, and by the time she married him, he had already become essentially the avatar of Cain, as well as the avatar of Assured.
Morathi, right?
Yeah, about Morathi.
Oh, okay.
So her husband, Anarion, she loved him. I think you could say she loved the idea of him more than she loved him. They did not have a healthy relationship at all. And he was
a blood elf can't get along with people.
Anarion was also Malekith's father, but when Morathi destroyed the Vortex, it was enough of a cataclysm that it allowed Slaanesh to, like the god Slaanesh, to briefly manifest in the world that was. And when he manifest, Morathi, along with another prominent character, literally got grabbed and dragged into the realm of chaos, and she was one of the first elves that got eaten by Slaanesh. Now, the good/bad news for the elves is that their immortal souls, Slaanesh does not seem to break them down very well. He just enjoys torturing them and keeping his stomach full. So Morathi was stuck in his gut for who knows how long. And at some point, Morathi is an expert at exploiting anything and everything around her to further her own ends, because she never really got to be the character that was the prominent front runner. She was always kind of more of the schemer in the background that did a lot of things that if anybody else tried to do, it would probably blow up in their face, but she managed to balance it most of the time. And somehow she basically pulled off a small scheme that caused Slaanesh to barf her out. And she was the only soul that escaped his guts. The only one, ever. So when
I'm just
Slaanesh
gonna
barfs,
imagine that she just punched her in the guadnum.
something along those lines. But she made Slaanesh sick, and when he barfed her out, she showed up in the realm of shadows, and she was her big scary snake form. And she learned to create her more classic form because Morathi is someone that takes a lot of pride in appearance, and she believes that she is someone that believes and has a lot of evidence to support her belief that being extremely attractive and sexy is a good way to have a one-up in diplomacy.
As she's right.
Yeah, she is right. And so she reunites with her son, Balerion, and they were not on friendly terms because they were trying to kill each other at the end of the world it was. But they came to a begrudging alliance, and Morathi played a super key role in capturing Slaanesh, which was one of the big events before AOS started.
Isn't that I imagine that the capture method for Slaanesh was actually the same capture method they did for the Chosen One in Kung Pao, where they just threw a tiny net at her?
It was not dissimilar to that. The big thing was getting Slaanesh to them in the first place, which Morathi played a huge role in because Tyrion, Teclis, and Balerion wanted to capture Slaanesh because they were hoping they could rip all the elf souls out of them because pretty much everything that died in the world that was has reincarnated into mortal realms in some way. Like the greenskins basically just were too greenskinned to stay dead. But the same thing with the ogres and stuff. Like, they all died, but when the mortal realms formed, they basically were just kind of naturally reincarnated. Most of the chaos races were scooped up by their gods and deposited in this new world.
I'm sorry, I'm just imagining, like, when Bender gets regurgitated from Futurama. I'm back, baby. It just keeps going.
Yep. And, but Morathi, with her knowledge of Slaanesh and having been in his guts and all that stuff, she devises a clever way for them to lure Slaanesh. So they lure Slaanesh into the Hidden Gloaming, which is like a hidden realm between the realms of light and shadow. And there they trap him in basically a giant BDSM cage where he is locked between these contradictory, paradoxical chains made out of shadow and light that have these giant barbed hooks on them that they basically not only have through Slaanesh's flesh, but they puncture his guts and they rip out these souls. But Morathi, so that was kind of during the Age of Myth. The Pantheon of Sigmar breaks apart because chaos starts messing with everybody. Like the elven gods become way too focused on trying to restore the elven race, so they stop paying attention to everything else that's going on. Gorka Morka gets tricked by Tzeentch because Tzeentch essentially whispers into his ear that he must not be all that tough and not the biggest and the baddest if he's willing to work with other gods. So he goes off on a rampage to prove he's the best. Sigmar or Nagash gets all uppity about some other shenanigans going on and is just waiting for an opportunity to backstab everybody. And the dwarf gods, Grimnir's dead by this point because he was too busy being a slayer. So when Sigmar saved him from an imprisonment, he wanted to fight the biggest, baddest monster there was, and they kamikazed. And then Grugni was just kind of doing what he could. He's a smith. He just was busy working on stuff. Chaos shows up. Age of Chaos happens. The Chaos Gods win everywhere, except for in essentially Azir. Sigmar cuts off the Realm of Heavens. The Realm of Light and the Realm of Shadow manage themselves okay, but pretty much everywhere else gets totally dominated. And that lasts for 500 years. Chaos. So it's basically the End Times 2.0. Except for this time, instead of ending with Chaos getting the final victory, kind of at the last minute before the 12th hour, Sigmar reopens his gates from the Realm of Heaven, shoots out the Stormcast Eternals everywhere, and it jacks up Chaos's plans, and a whole series of shenanigans go down called the Realm Gate Wars, which was first edition. It was kind of the narrative event of first edition. And then
did the Chaos Gods then turn half of those Sigmarines against them and cause like the Sigmar heresy?
I keep expecting that to happen. Because there are evil Stormcasts, but they're not traitors. They're more like really creepy automatons at this point. But they're like Stormcasts that have been reforged so many times. Because whenever you get reforged, you lose something in the process because it's not a perfect process. So you generally will like
that new burp girl.
Yeah, so generally, like, you'll lose memories is kind of the first thing to go, but you can also get, like, mutations, but they're, like, Stormcast mutations, so it's like your hair turns, like, changes colors, or you have lightning coming out of your eyes, or you glow, but there are certain chambers of the Stormcast Eternals, or chapters if they were Space Marines, but there are chambers that the guys have been reforged so many times that they're not really human anymore, and they really struggle to tell the difference between, like, doing... They struggle to tell the nuance between things anymore. So there's like they published a really cool short story near the end of first edition about a village that had been held by Nurgle. The Stormcast show up and defeat the Nurgle forces, but because all the people in the village are sick, they're not evil. Like, they will get better. The story is very explicit. Like, they'll be fine if they just have some time and some healing. But the Stormcast can't. Like, they have no rationale for, like, different levels of evil. So they just see these people are sick and they're like, oh, that's Nurgle, and they just start murdering all of them, and they literally butcher the entire city.
It's about a little murder.
Yeah, and like one of the final event in Broken Realms, which we're building up to in Kragnos, is that all of destruction, so all the Orks and the Grats and the Ogres and the Giants, like all of them, or Gargants rather, are all marching to this city called Excelsis. And Excelsis has a problem where the Stormcast in charge of it are very, very strict, and they are not good. They're borderline evil, and whenever the city has isn't, say, religious enough, they will happily take you out back and shoot you, essentially. And so Tzeentch tried to take advantage of this city, but because these guys are so vigilant, they actually discovered the cult really easily. But the problem was, the moment they found a Tzeentchian cult, they were like, oh, the city's tainted, so they purged like half the population when they only needed to kill like maybe a couple hundred people. So,
okay.
So Excelsis,
they're excessive, just a pinch.
Yeah, and so the city's defenses are like really undermanned right now, and the largest destruction army we've ever seen is about to come down on them, with every single destruction special character in tow. And now a god of destruction is about to show up on the scene. So things aren't looking too great for Excelsis. But back to Morathi with Broken Realms, her story was actually really, really exciting, which was the first Broken Realms book. In that it had a lot of really cool fantasy callbacks, as well as advancing the AOS narrative in a lot of really interesting ways. But the big thing about Morathi that's super important about her is that of the five major elf characters who were resurrected very quickly, who were like kind of godlike figures, she was the only one that was not actually a god. So you had Malarian, who was the rename of her son Malekith for copyright reasons, who's now the god of shadow. Tyrion and Teclis are both the gods of light. They're the twin gods of light. And then Alariel, the Everqueen, became the god of life, and Morathi was kind of left out in the dust. So,
she's just sitting there like, hi.
Yeah, but Morathi is never one to take crap like that laying down, which is what's really interesting about her. She's the biggest schemer in Warhammer history, save only next to like Neferata and Tzeentch. And so Morathi, in the Age of Myth, her scheme there was the first thing she really ever tried to do is she kind of tried to worm her way into being on more aspects of the Pantheon. Like, Sigmar did not really trust her that much. None of the Elven gods wanted anything to do with her. They all hated her for all the shenanigans she kind of pulled in the world that was. And also they kind of knew she was tainted by Slaanesh, her physical form, and that she had a lot of repressed torture memories and stuff. And so they just didn't want to deal with her. They thought she was unclean. And then the dwarf gods hated her because, they're Dwarden, they don't like elves anyway. And she didn't want anything to do with Gorka Borka, so that literally just left Nagash. So she actually tried to formulate an alliance with Nagash, which led to an incident where she essentially tried to seduce him, which unfortunately did not work very well because A, Nagash is, he's big dead bone daddy, and B, Nagash is one of those guys. He's one of those creatures that he is so arrogant, so conceited, and so self-involved that the idea of love to him is like completely foreign. Like, he has no desire for anything but himself.
Yeah,
And
Nagash may be made of bones, but Nagash can't bone.
so she tries to seduce him, and Nagash gets pretty angry about it and rebukes her in front of the entire pantheon of gods. But he rebukes her so by basically just blasting her with a bunch of power, and it causes her to reveal her true form instead of her sexy form. So she turns into the giant snake monster in front of all the gods, and she's livid about it, which is why she actually she hates Nagash nowadays. He embarrassed her, and she does not forget embarrassments ever.
In all fairness, it would be the same as him pulling her skirt down.
Yes.
I'd be pissed too. Not gonna lie, I'd be very upsketty.
Yeah, well, especially for a character that puts so much effort into appearing very regal and put together and stuff. Revealing a bestial, horrific nightmare form in front of the rest of your fellow pantheons, kind of a dick move. But Morathi did eventually find she started her plan because all the elven gods died at the end of the world that was. So Loek, Cain, Mathlan, Lilith, everybody died.
Take that, suckers.
But Cain was a little different because, well, it's implied that it would be possible, kinda, for them to come back if one could, like, find all of their bits and pieces and kind of put them back together and then worship them enough where they kind of started anew. But it's not really possible for any of them. They are very heavily dead. The one exception was Cain. During the finale of the End Times, although Cain's mortal avatar, which was Tyrion at the time, was murdered, and he died, and Cain's power died with him, and the Widowmaker, his super big, amazing sword, got chucked into the ocean after it lost all its power. So Cain was functionally dead at that point, or depowered. He still tried to fight Khorne on, like, the godly plane, and got ripped to pieces. So Khorne literally rips Cain apart after they fight, and he rips out Cain's heart and squeezes all the blood out of it to drink it, and then just chucks it. Well, Morathi found out that had happened, and she finds the heart, which is in the possession of a god beast who was the father of the Charybdii, the Charybdis is like a big nasty monster in AOS that's like a giant, it's like a hydra, but all of its heads are like giant leech mouths. Like, it's a very unpleasant sea creature. And Morathi finds the father of the Charybdises, which is like a colossal god beast. And she realizes he has the heart, and also realizes that he's not going to part with it, because whoever has it gets some pretty juicy powers out of it, so she wants it for herself. And so she falls back on her usual tactic, which is to try and seduce him. Except for this time it works. She does seduce the father of the father of Charybdii. It's not really implied that they do anything. I think it's more of like a Beauty and the Beast kind of manipulation scenario, where she basically works on its pride and a bunch of other stuff, because god beasts, most of them are like vaguely intelligent. But she seduces the god beast of the Charybdii until she steals the heart. The moment she steals the heart, he immediately is onto her, and they have a big fight. She turns into her giant snake form. They have a punching match. He tries to kill her, gets kind of close, but she ends up beating him. So Morathi manages to overcome a god beast, which is a big, massive accomplishment, to be frank, especially for a not god at all. And she takes the heart of Cain, and this is when Morathi starts to concoct her scheme, which is that, okay, if I'm not a god, maybe I can become a god, which no one has ever really tried to do on purpose and succeeded. There have been characters who have become gods who were once mortals, like Alariel, Tyrion, Teclis, Sigmar, Nagash. None of them were originally gods, so Morathi figures, okay, if they can do it, there's no reason I can't do it. So she takes this heart, and she starts creating her own race of elves, which are the daughters of Cain. And the reason she basically plays this up is she tricks the rest of the elven pantheon by trying to be like, hey, I'm going to do it. So Tyrion and Teclis, they're trying to bring back the high elves. well, I'm going to try and bring back the elves too, but we're going to worship Cain like we did back in Naggaroth instead of worshiping like whatever nonsense you guys are doing. And so they're okay with it. She keeps the fact that they're going to be worshiping her hidden, because she lies to all of her followers and everybody by saying, oh yeah, we're going to worship Cain. I'm just the Oracle of Cain. I'm just his voice. I can hear him. But we're gonna find all of his shards and resurrect him. When Morathi knows there are no shards. Like, the only piece of Cain that exists is his heart, which she has. So whenever someone worships Cain, that devotion goes to her, because it goes to the heart, and then she literally just sucks it out of the heart. So she's building up all this power, just sucking up all of this devotion and worship, and she builds this massive culture of the Daughters of Cain who think they're worshiping Cain, and they kind of are, but in reality it's all going to Morathi. Because as long as she has the heart, Cain can't regenerate. So, and she uses these shards as a clever way to control the Daughters of Cain. Because if a particular group, a coven of the Daughters of Cain, like, gets too powerful, or maybe like they start discovering the truth behind Cain, or maybe they're making alliances with people Morathi doesn't like, she'll send them on a suicide mission to get a shard, where she's like, oh hey, this Chaos Citadel has this really important shard I need you to get of Cain. Like, this is the most important thing to our religion, is getting back pieces of Cain. It's an honor to get to do this, and if you refuse, you'll be executed on the spot for, refusing a holy mission. When in reality, it's literally just a suicide mission. Like, her goal is to get them all killed. And if they happen to get an artifact that's powerful and take it for the Dark Gods, great. Win-win. And there's actually a really good book about this. I'm actually going to be doing a review video on it soon called Covens of Blood, which is a story. It's 3 stories about 3 different covens of Daughters of Cain, and kind of going through Morathi's manipulations and schemes. It's a really good book. But and it's also cool because it was actually written by 3 different women, who I think 2 of them are new to running AOS, and they did such a kick-ass job. But
I actually noticed that the new writers for Games Workshop are absolutely blowing it out of the water.
Oh yeah, they're doing a great job. I've been really enjoying a lot of AOS lore. So Morathi is now essentially a demigod. So she's still not a god, because she's a pretender. No one's worshiping her. And even absorbing the power from Cain, it's still not enough. So then we get to Broken Realms, which is when Morathi decides to put her master plan into play, which is that, it's super clever, actually. What she does is that, first of all, she finds out that Archaon has discovered this really powerful substance called Varanite, which in all of the mortal realms, there's something called Realmstone, and Realmstone is literally just like the power of that realm, like the magic it's based on, coalesced into its most purified, powerful form. So it's kind of like uranium, but it'll be changed depending on the realm. So like in the realm of light, it's these literal like shafts of light that get captured into these like crystal prisms. In the realm of Ulgu, it's like these shadowy tendrils, and they have these wild, crazy effects, but they're super duper powerful as energy sources, but they're also really dangerous to work with. Well, Morathi finds out that Archaon has discovered the realm stone of the 8 Points, which is his home, which is this giant fortress realm that sits in the center of all 8 realms, and they're all connected to it. And it's become so saturated with chaos that it's got Varanite, which is the power of change embodied. Like, it's just pure molten rock blood chaos goodness. And Archaon's plan is to use it to force open a gateway to the Realm of Heavens so he can invade it and kill Sigmar, because Archaon's got huge daddy problems and beef with Sigmar that he's trying to resolve by killing him. And Morathi realizes that this stuff is what she's been waiting for, because she literally tests it on one of her followers and sees that this stuff has like insane change properties. Like, a single drop can turn a completely normal and very chaos resistant person into a chaos spawn in like 2 seconds.
Okay, that seems perfectly fair and balanced.
Yeah, so she thinks to herself, all right, if I steal a massive amount of this stuff, maybe if I could find a way to direct and control it, I can turn myself into a god. So she goes on her big heist mission that takes place during Broken Realms Morathi, where she tricks Alariel and the Sigmar into helping her. Because she tricks Sigmar by... Well, she kind of tricks him. Like, she's honest, she just doesn't tell him the whole truth. Where she's like, hey, Archaon has all this Veronite stuff, we should go stop him before he invades the Realm of Heavens. And he's like, oh, yeah, that seems like a great idea. Of course, she backstabs him, and instead of destroying the Veronite, she steals all the Veronite from Archaon, which I'm sure when he finds out about, he's going to be very upset. Because he's been collecting that stuff forever.
He'll be completely chill. They'll have tea.
Yes, Archaon, the most relaxed character.
Morathi will try to seduce him.
And so Morathi steals just insane amounts of this Veronite. Basically the whole store that Archaon's minions had built up. And pumps it into what's called the Mother Cauldron, which is Mathquar, which is her big cauldron of blood back home. It's like the OG giant cauldron of blood. And it's the one that, like, whenever Morathi creates Daughters of Cain, so the way they create elves in AOS, except for rare exception, is that because all of the elves, with rare exception, were eaten by Slaanesh, they would throw hooks into them, drag the souls out, and then would like kind of look at their condition and then parse them out among the elf gods, the four of them. Tyrion, Teclis, Malarian, and Morathi, and they were allowed to do with them whatever they want. So Morathi would use her souls, she would put them in Mathquar, and she would build them a body, either as like a witch elf, or if she had a particular goal in mind for them, she would make them into a Melusai or a Kennerai, which are they're not corrupted, but they have some of like Morathi's personal anguish and her rage put into them, so they gain like bestial features. So they're the giant snake ladies or the ladies with the harpy wings, and they're like the super loyal people to her. Yeah, lots of snicks. So Morathi pumps all this Veronite into Mathquar, and the other thing she does is she steals the Idoneth Deepkin's most treasured artifact, which is this. It's like a lantern, and originally it was created by Teclis, and the lantern's goal was that it allowed you to search for specific souls in Slaanesh's body, or you could look for souls that had like the most pure or powerful properties, and allowed them to pull out a lot of really powerful individuals. Like Teclis used it to pull out what little essence he could to try and recreate Eltharion the Grim, who is now Eltharion I forget what they call him, what his full title is, but Eltharion the invisible man, the guy in the empty armor suit who's made out of pure light. And they create a lot of really powerful elves using this, but Teclis, the first elves he made using it were the OGs of the Idoneth Deepkin, who had a lot of problems because the elf gods did not know how to purify them of Slaanesh's they have really bad PTSD, essentially. They still remember being Slaanesh's guts, which is like the most torturous hell imaginable. Because you're subject to like everything and anything Slaanesh would want to do to you, which is not great. And so
it's not great at all.
Yeah, when Teclis realizes that they're corrupted, Teclis's knee-jerk reaction is to destroy them. That he looks at them and goes, oh, failed experiment, I'm just going to clean the slate and start over. Well, they're already sentient beings, and so they go to steal this lantern, because as long as this lantern exists, Teclis can just find them, no matter where they are. So they steal the lantern from him and run away, though 99% of them die in the process. The only one of these super elves, these original Idoneth Deepkin, that gets away and is still alive in the modern AOS is Volturnus, who is the High King of the Idoneth Deepkin. So more of these agents managed to steal this lantern from a super secret, horrifying underground prison full of unspeakable darkness and sea monsters and stuff. Only one of them barely gets away. Bring her the lantern, and now Morathi has everything she needs. So Morathi, up to this point, we've been getting hints through AOS First Edition that Morathi has been taking more souls than she's supposed to from Slaanesh, because the way that the prison works is that because Slaanesh is stuck between the realm of light and shadow, he's basically caught in a paradox of those two elements. But if one side starts taking too much pressure on him, starts taking too many souls out of him, it'll start pushing him, it'll start pulling him towards that realm. So Morathi has been secretly stealing more souls than she's supposed to because she wants to bolster her army, the Daughters of Cain, up as much as possible, which has been kind of messing with Slaanesh's prison and destabilizing it. Then Morathi decides to make her play and damn the consequences, which is that she fills her cauldron full of all this Varanite, and she takes the lantern with her, and she unleashes this super hilarious, frankly, ritual where she, over the Age of Chaos, so the last 500 years, she has had the Daughters of Cain capture champions of the other 3 dark gods. So they've been capturing champions of Nurgle, champions of Khorne, champions of Tzeentch, and building them up as prisoners in all of these different places that form like a little symbol around her fortress in the Realm of Shadow. And she has all of them execute and just do a mass execution, just a genocide of all these prisoners, and uses the cauldron to forcefully pour all of those souls into Slaanesh's guts. So Slaanesh starts getting force-fed all of these souls, but to him, they're the most disgusting souls imaginable because they're the souls of champions purely dedicated to his brother gods. So Slaanesh, who's already a pretty bloated god with all the elf souls that he's devoured over the millennia, starts getting hysterically bloated and is basically so overwhelmed and so nauseated by like...
Hold up. Their plan was to give Slaanesh a tummy ache until she threw up.
Not quite. Close, but the goal wasn't to make Slaanesh...
but not the other end.
No. The goal... So, Morathi didn't want to make Slaanesh throw up, even though that's kind of what he ends up doing. What she wanted was... Her goal was to basically stuff Slaanesh with so much garbage that it would make him super sick, because it would make him unable to concentrate on the fact that she was going into his guts. Because she knew that if she just went into his guts, that would basically just be like walking into a lion's den covered in beef. Like, she would just be instantly dead. So she uses this massive glutting of souls to basically hide her presence and to make it where Slaanesh is in so much agony that he can't focus on anything going on. Because he's in distinct agony from this process. Like he's getting tortured in a way he doesn't want to be tortured.
That's a lot for
so
Slaanesh.
So Morathi throws herself into the Varanite, which could very easily turn her into a monstrous abomination that completely loses her mind. So she's kind of on the clock. And while this is also happening, she's being invaded by the Deepkin, who are super pissed that she stole the lantern from them. And they consider that a violation of any kind of treaty and decide to invade her and kill her. Volturnus gathers up literally the entire Deepkin race, and they go on a big invasion of Morathi's citadel. And so she's really against the clock because she has to finish this before they get to her. So she invades Slaanesh guts, which is when we get this beautiful callback to Warhammer Fantasy, where Morathi knows Slaanesh's guts like nobody else, and she knows where all of the really good stuff is, which she didn't tell the other elf gods about. Because while Teclis was looking for really powerful souls, he didn't know where the Phoenix Kings were. Which the Phoenix Kings were the lords of the elves from Warhammer Fantasy. So Anarion, her husband, was the first Phoenix King. Then there was Belinar, and Malekith always wanted to be Phoenix King, but kept getting denied, and ended up becoming the Witch King in spite.
He literally went Anakin Skywalker. Got it.
Yes, there's a lot of similarities between those two, yes. So there's been like 10-ish Phoenix Kings, but each one of them were heavily blessed by Ashurin, the creator god of the elves in Warhammer Fantasy, and by far the most powerful god in their pantheon. And these souls were all blessed with a significant portion of his power. So what does Morathi do? She invades Slaanesh's guts while he's distracted, being tortured by being force-fed the most disgusting meal possible. She uses the lantern to get to the secret place in his guts where all of these Slaanesh's most prized souls are, his most delicious, delectable meals. And here she finds all the Phoenix Kings. And instead of helping them or pulling them out and turning them into her servants, not this time. These dudes are literally everything that stood in Morathi's way during Warhammer Fantasy, and there are a few people she hates more. So she turns herself into a serpent and basically starts devouring all of the Phoenix King's souls. Like, she punctures them with her fangs and sucks all the god juice out. So...
Jokes can be made, but sure.
Yep. And so she eats all the Phoenix Kings except for one, which is her husband, Anarion. And that's the last soul she comes to, which is the biggest and brightest and the most powerful. And she hesitates. And she hesitates because despite the fact that Anarion never really loved her, she loved him very, very deeply. They have a very tragic relationship because by the time Morathi met and married Anarion, his first wife and he believed his first two children had already been murdered by the demons of chaos. He had already drawn the sword of Cain, so he had the god of creation and also the murder god inside of him, and was a very conflicted, tortured soul. And he was a very abusive husband and he never loved her. He was very passionate towards her, but only in a very carnal sense. And she interpreted that as love. But she cared for Anarion very deeply, to the extent that when the world was dying in Warhammer Fantasy, Anarion ended up sacrificing his life to give a bunch of other elves time to save it. But Morathi, she looked into the future and saw he was going to die, so she literally begged him, which Morathi does not beg, but she begged him, like crying on her hands and knees, not to go and stay with her, and to find a way to survive the apocalypse instead of allowing himself to die and separating them. And he denies her and leaves and gets himself killed to save the world. But Morathi, of course, took that very personally, but he was not a good husband to her. He never was. And he was not a super great father to Malekith either. But anyway, so when Morathi sees him, she doesn't commit to the attack. And Anarion's soul, realizing that there is a predator before him, literally transmogs himself essentially into the Sword of Cain, which was the deadliest weapon in Warhammer Fantasy, and he cuts Morathi in half. So this soul sword literally just shears her soul straight down the middle into two halves, which causes her horrendous agony. And at that moment, she finally seizes on him and devours him. So she kills Anarion and devours his soul. And when her soul splits, it causes Mathkor, the cauldron that she's using to protect her body, and her soul cracks right as Volturnus breaks into the throne room to kill her and all of her attendants. And when Mathkor blows up, out of it walks Morathi, who has now completely and utterly absorbed the essence of not only Cain, but Assurin. So she has completely devoured the essence of the two most powerful gods ever in the elven pantheons from the world that was. Two super powerful gods who, when they worked together, the big four, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, Nurgle, and Khorne, were scared of Anarion when he had both their powers combined. So Morathi is now the new Anarion because she's devoured all of this power. The only downside is that when her soul gets chopped in half, it stays chopped in half.
Yeah, because now she's two things. She's the giant snake and she's the cute little girl.
Yeah, so you have cute Morathi, which is Morathi Mencha Cain, or Morathi Cain, who is kind of she is the diplomat, she is the sorceress, the very magically powerful, conniving, scheming diplomat, who is very, very magically powerful and is an excellent general. And then all of her rage, her torment, her suffering, all of that other side of her, the tortures inflicted on her by Slaanesh, the embarrassment she suffered at the face of all of her defeats in Warhammer Fantasy and AOS, all that stuff coalesced into the Shadow Queen, which is the big scary snake that is all of her bestial rage and is a super powerful beat-em-up god. And the two of them share a mind, so they're not separate entities, so to speak. It's kind of like her soul is in two parts, but they're still connected. So she can't let either of them die. And she can always sense what the other one is seeing, feeling, thinking. Like, they are completely and utterly connected, no matter the distance and all that jazz. And Volturnus, at this point, tries to fight her and kill her, being the most powerful of the Idoneth. And pre-Godhood Morathi probably would have really, really struggled, if not lost that fight. But now she's a god. And her big form whoops Volturnus really hard, despite the fact that he is, like, insanely strong and has, like, a really badass deep mare mount and all this other crap. So Volturnus gets defeated, but instead of killing him, she spares him, because Morathi is nothing but clever. Because the Idoneth Deepkin as a race are really, really scary and powerful, and she's already planning a civil war against the other gods of order. But in Volturnus, she sees an ally, because she knows that he understands. The Idoneth Deepkin are essentially an atheist race. They don't worship any gods. Like, the only gods they feel connected to are the dead gods of the old world, especially Mathalan, the god of the seas, who is super dead and is never coming back. But they worship, like, the idea of him. But they don't believe in the gods. They think the gods are cruel and backstabby and not friendly at all. So Morathi decides to be the one god that treats them well, because not only does she spare Volturnus and order all of the Daughters of Cain to stand down and stop attacking them, she also gives him back the lantern, and as a bonus gift, she gives him all the souls of his brothers and sisters. All of the original super badass Deepkin elves that Teclis destroyed, and they got shunted back into Slaanesh's guts. She gives all of them, nothing asked in return, just gives them to Volturnus, knowing that that is like the ultimate prize for him. I mean, that's literally like walking up to an orphan from a huge family and being like, hey, all I ask is, like, you consider us being friends. By the way, here's, like, all of your brothers and sisters and your parents and your uncles and grandparents just free of charge. Like, you just get them back and can put them back together and bring them back to life.
Thanks, Morathi.
Like, just a huge master stroke. So the Idoneth Deepkin are now very teamed up with the Daughters of Cain, which leads into the Siege of Anvilgard, which was one of Sigmar's cities in, I believe, the realm of fire? Either fire or shadow. I think it was in the realm of fire. But Anvilgard gets... Morathi has had a cult there for a long time, known as the Black Scale Coil, that she's been using to manipulate their politicians and their army and all this stuff, and she leads a big invasion with the help of the Idoneth Deepkin, and they take the city with this brilliant move where they don't want Sigmar to know they're taking the city, so they manage to take the city, which has a Stormkeep, which means it has a massive group of Stormcast in it, but they don't kill a single Stormcast. They just paralyze them with, like, toxins or poisons or just knock them out. And they capture all the Stormcast alive. Only one gets away, and that's the one that it was revealed in Be'lakor, the third Broken Realms book.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Morathi's master plan for, like, dealing with everything is to either have sex with it or give it a bellyache.
If she can't kill it, yes.
Just pointing this out. She did it to Slaanesh, she did it to Gash, and now she's doing it to them.
Yeah, which, I mean, in her defense, usually it works pretty well. I mean,
when in
like,
doubt,
for her,
give somebody a bellyache.
Yeah, for, like, probably my favorite story about Morathi from fantasy, Warhammer Fantasy, was during the Great War against Chaos, which is actually where we're going back to with Warhammer the Old Worlds, is we're going back to the Great War. The forces of Chaos got all stirred up because of Azavar Kul, who was the Everchosen before Archaon. But a big group of them, Marauders and Warriors of Chaos and monsters and all this stuff, went to invade Nagaroth, and Morathi single-handedly stopped the invasion. And the way she stopped the invasion was she got with a bunch of her sorceress gal pals. They all mounted up on dark Pegasi. They flew out to the Chaos Horde where all the chieftains were gathered, and she landed and basically put on a insane orgy for the entire group with all of her little sorceress buddies. And the Marauders and Chaos Warriors were so shocked and impressed. They were like, this has to be a goddess of Slaanesh. Like, it's got to be a demon. She's got to be a demon of Slaanesh. Like, there's no way this isn't Slaanesh. So she's like, hey, you all work for me now. And they're like, okay. So she gets this huge horde of barbarians to then invade Ulthuan instead, alongside Malekith's legions. And she even repeated this in the Storm of Chaos, which was the OG version of the End Times that got retconned out because Archaon lost, and they were like, oh, well, we can't have that. So they retconned it. But in that version, Morathi led an invasion of Lestria as the head of the Cult of Slaanesh, because Morathi in the old days was she wasn't, I would not call her a worshiper of Slaanesh, but she was very happy to manipulate Slaanesh, and she knew how to give Slaanesh things that would tantalize him enough to get him to dedicate anything she wanted to a cause. In the last edition of Warhammer Fantasy, it was retconned where they added like a dark side to the Pantheon of the Elves. So instead of Slaanesh being the pleasure god, it was Authority was the pleasure god. So then Morathi was not chaos aligned anymore. But she has a hilarious history of like, all right, I'm going to try sleeping with it. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to kill it. And if that doesn't work, we'll find some kind of weird other plan C.
So bellyache.
Yeah, so bellyache. Which, unfortunately for Morathi, her plan was a little too ambitious. And right around the time when her soul got cut in half, basically like the backlash from her getting cut in half inside of Slaanesh's guts was basically like, that was what pushed him over the edge. And Slaanesh vomits out a huge shard of himself, like a massive.
He shards himself.
He shards himself, yeah, big time. And that shard shoots off like a meteor and lands in, I believe, the realm of Shadow, where it becomes the twins, the new Slaanesh characters that are coming out.
The peacocks.
Yeah, the peacock and the butterfly.
Mm-hmm. Who look absolutely amazing.
Morathi is essentially their dad. Slaanesh gave birth to them, but Morathi was the one who shot something in that made it happen.
Huh.
She is their illegitimate father. Their deadbeat dad.
Huh. Well, at least they have two mothers.
Yeah, not a bad thing, all things considered. I'm still shocked that they're twins. I thought it was just going to be one thing, but nope, there's two.
Well, okay then.
Because of course.
So that's where we are currently in the lore, correct?
Yes. And then basically the major things that have happened throughout Broken Realms, Nagash, second edition was mostly about death and Nagash. They were on the Ascendant because Nagash did the Necroquake, where he was basically trying to make it where anything that died would go to him instead of to the people they worshipped. And I assume it works this way in 40k, maybe not, but at least in Fantasy and AOS, when you die, the god that you worship most or embody most, your soul basically goes to them, and the animus of your soul fuels them. So it gives them life, it gives them power.
In 40k, what happens is all souls go to the realm of souls, the warp. And they're typically devoured by demons. But if you worship a pantheon, it can potentially go to them, depending on the god's strength. Gods in 40k are technically not gods. They're just giant collective demons. But they're just known as gods. The Tau have a god. The Tau have a god because of humans, which also led to a massive exodus of the Gavesa, the mass extermination of the Gavesa, which no one talks about how evil the Tau are for doing that. But I digress about that. Chaos worshippers go to their selective gods, but people loyal to the God Emperor Mankind, what happens is if their faith is strong enough, when they die, their soul goes into the warp, and then it's guided to the Astronomicon, where the holy radiant light of the Emperor makes it so demons can't enter and devour the souls. There you rest for all eternity, until the Emperor decides to clap your cheeks and bring you back to life as the Legion of the Damned. Or living saints. Nice. In the case of his children.
Yeah, so, okay. So in fantasy, it's very similar, but it's slightly different in that it's pretty much your soul can get like intercepted, but it's pretty rare. Generally, it'll make a pretty successful trip to where it's supposed to go. You'll get nom-nommed by the god that you want to. So Nagash tries to cheat the system. Nagash unleashes a ritual, and his goal is to make it where no matter where you die, or how you die, or where you think you're going to go, you just go to Nagash. Which, if it had worked, would have been like a brilliant masterstroke that would have instantly won, because even the Chaos Gods would have starved to death very quickly. But, of course, it gets goofed up by the Skaven, because Nagash has Nagash has like a Saturday morning cartoon vibe when it comes to the Skaven.
Skeletor.
Yeah, every single time Nagash tries to pull off something major, the Skaven screw him over. 3 times he's been stopped by the Skaven. 3 times, which is just sad. They even made a goofy scene in what book was it? Soul Wars, which covers the events of Nagash casting the Necroquake. There's even this goofy part where he's about to unleash the super ritual to end all life and turn himself into the one true god. And he's like going down the list of all the gods that could threaten him, because everyone's trying to stop him once they figure out what he's doing. So he's like, okay, I've dealt with this. And then like at the very end, he's kind of sitting there and he's like, yeah, that takes care of everyone except for the rat. And then there's literally a bunch of ellipses, and he's like, the rat. Have I dealt with the rat? And like he starts having flashbacks to how when he was alive, the way Nagash was like this unstoppable lich, essentially, that was that nobody could kill, and he was the first true immortal. But the way his first body was destroyed was that frickin' Skaven literally he captured his worst enemy and was keeping him imprisoned and tortured him within an inch of his life, and then was like, okay, I'll deal with you later. I'm going to go cast the super ritual. And then the Skaven freed that guy, gave him the Fell Blade, which is basically just a nuclear bomb compressed into a sword that will kill you for wielding it, but it will also kill whatever you stab with it. So they then lead him to Nagash's room and protect him using magic from Nagash's spells, and he chops up Nagash's body and destroys him. So that was strike 1. Then during the end times, Nagash shenanigans can't devour the entirety of the Wind of Death and become the one true god of death right away, because there was something wrong with his body. So he's like, all right, I got to fix my body, and then I'll devour the soul over time. But in the meantime, I'll just pour all of the stuff I can't eat into my giant black pyramid, which will act as like a reservoir, and then I'll use that later. So during the end times, he gets lured out briefly from his pyramid. The Skaven infiltrate it and set off a nuke. So they destroyed the Black Pyramid. So that's strike 2. And then during this event, he's sitting there remembering all this, and he's like, oh shit. And like literally at that moment, there's a group of Skaven inside the new Black Pyramid who get compressed and destroyed by the ritual, but just because they're naturally chaotic creatures, they're, Skaven are just a hardcore chaos embodied. Their essence, and they were also like prying garbage out of the walls because they're like, ooh, these are shiny trinkets, and we're just ripping things out of the walls. So the ritual borks really hard, and instead of making it where all souls go to Nagash, it just inverts a lot of the magical laws. So Nagash like still is on the ascendant, but not nearly what he wanted because of the stupid rats. But, so Broken Realms finally sees the Necroquake brought to an end. Nagash tries to invade the Realm of Light, and he fights Teclis in a really awesome comic book style battle, which gives Teclis really hardcore PTSD because he almost dies. But he beats Nagash, and he shatters his body on Mount Avalanor, and then he casts a super big spell that ends the Necroquake. But Alariel, the goddess of life, warns him that he shouldn't have done that, because he prematurely ended the cycle of death, he is prematurely starting the cycle of life, and she basically tries to warn him, you don't understand what you're dealing with. Too much, like, life without restriction, life unbound, is just as dangerous, if not more so. And Teclis is like, it'll be fine. And this is what kind of leads us to Kragnos. And then book 3 covers Be'lakor trying to become a god. He fails. He gets close, but he does find a way to make it where Stormcast Eternals are no longer eternal. And he perma-kills a whole bunch of them with help from Lady Ollander, who is my favorite character by far. I love Lady Ollander. And they have a funny team-up, which was great. And Be'lakor nearly wins. There's a giant space battle, which cracked me up. It's literally a space battle from 40k, except for it was a Silver Tower of Tzeentch versus a bunch of flying temple cities of the Seraphon, and I loved every second of it. But, yeah.
There's a lot to AOS. Damn.
There is. It's kind of funny. After getting, I'm first and foremost a lore master of Warhammer Fantasy. But AOS, it's genuinely hard to keep up with because the narrative moves really fast.
Which is a good thing. We actually need moving narratives, which is why I like all the new 40k books, because they're not just stuck in this stagnant, boring, old Imperium. They're moving forward.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Fantasy and 40k were at their worst in like the early 2000s to the early 2010s because they were unmoving narratives. They were stagnant and nothing happened.
And I still love...
AOS has been great.
I still love, like, all of the people who are like, oh, if they advanced the story, then they'd have to call it Warhammer 41k. And it's just like, no, they wouldn't. 40k is just the title of the series. It's kind of like Battlefleet Gothic. Do you really think Battlefleet Gothic took place anywhere near the Tau? Do you think the Gothic sector has ever seen a Tau ever?
I didn't realize we had to be, like, perfectly literal with our game titles.
Which is why I think GW should stop doing that with certain game titles. Like, Adeptus Titanicus, it's set in the Horus Heresy. Well, take away the Horus Heresy, and you can have Adeptus Titanicus fighting all of the different types of Titans. In fact, you could just make new ones. And a lot of people, they get really hurt when GW just makes new things because they have this mindset that the game can't change. And it's their own fault. So, like, we go back and we see things just added into the lore that were never there before. Like, it was long since established. The Chaos Gods threw the Primarchs into the solar system to deviate the Emperor. Well, it actually wasn't. It was Urda, his wife. His wasn't wife at the time. The Emperor has a complex relationship. Turns out he was in a polyamorous relationship. Which is really nice.
Oh, I wanted to ask this. Since I'm in here, this has been bothering me, and I wanted to ask. I've heard a lot of like crazy theories about what the Emperor actually is.
He's a perpetual.
Like I've heard, because it's like I've heard from like a perpetual to like an advanced AI that pretended to be a person to like a last-ditch Hail Mary by a renegade Old One creation.
So
to like just
here's a big thing that 40k fans hate to hear. And it's that the old ones are just not relevant to the story. They're just not relevant to the current story of 40k. They've never done anything with humanity. They've never done anything with anything. Humanity existed alongside of... Actually, humanity... It was 60 million years ago when the old ones died. But that's not important. The Emperor himself in the book Saturnine... They explain that the Emperor himself is a very, very, very powerful psyker, like one of the most powerful psykers in existence, and that he is a perpetual. He is part of a perpetual order. Oh, and we also know now that Abaddon was not the first Primarch discovered. It was actually the missing Primarch, O2, and it was they were discovered by Urda because Urda didn't have them separate. That Primarch went with Urda and acts as their protector. So we actually do know where one of the missing Primarchs is. The other one is dead. The Emperor was jealous about this, so deleted all records about him.
The Emperor sounds so petty.
So the Emperor is both super petty and not petty at the same time. And this is going to sound weird. The Emperor operates in a theater of thousands of different timelines fighting against the Chaos Gods who are trying to deviate and cause the destruction and ruination of everything. One key thing, a big difference between AOS and 40k, which is why that I hate when they try to connect the universes and be like, ha ha, look, they're in the same dimension. No, stop it. They're completely different stories. And I hate the fact that GW constantly makes reference that they're in the same universe.
Yeah, those cheeky Easter eggs caused me a lot of heartache too.
Yeah, because in AOS, Khorne actually has honor. Khorne in 40k has no honor whatsoever. His favorite champion is the Betrayer. Khorne is just as happy to murder a child that he is to murder anything. And that's fine. Slaanesh in AOS has beauty and artwork. In 40k, Slaanesh has replaced that pride and whatever, instead with the hedonistic, torturistic behavior that you do to try to perfect something, even though you can never perfect something, and dying for your work, or committing hedonistic acts so vile that it gives Slaanesh power. And we're not talking like normal sex. We're talking off-the-wall murder, torture, things of that nature.
Oh, yeah. I will say I am very happy with Slaanesh's redesign. Like, the way they went with excess in all things instead of just, like, super creepy things, much better.
Yeah, but in 40k, it's still just the super creepy things. AOS's lore for the Chaos Gods is just better. Hands down. Like, it is just 100 times better. The demons in AOS just make more sense, are more relatable, and have character. In 40k, they're just a bunch of murder hobos. But, the Emperor himself, his name is, Neil, I think it is. Neil. Or...
His name's Neil?
Yeah, he's got a very common name. It's not that. It's something, or Nihil or something like that. It's a very common name. Again, this is in the book Saturnine. And currently what the Emperor is doing is he's beating the Chaos Gods. Like, he has won. The Chaos Gods just haven't caught up yet. This is my theory, though, so I'm going to put this out with a grain of salt, but I know me and Wolflord Rowe agree on this, that the Emperor's actually won, and the Chaos Gods just haven't realized it yet. Chaos Gods wanted to kill the Emperor. The Emperor knew that if he died, it would cause a cataclysmic event that would overtake the Imperium. He knew if he lived, it would cause a cataclysmic event that would destroy the Imperium, so he chose the only option that he had left, which was to sit and wait. He listened to Urda, and Urda told him to sit, wait, and let humans evolve naturally and just guide them, because that's what the Perpetuals are meant to do. The Perpetuals are an actual species of human. Anything that is a Perpetual is made a Perpetual afterwards, is an artificial Perpetual, similar to Vulcan Histan and a few of the other characters. But when Urda told him this, the Emperor freaked out and hated it. But the Emperor wanted to turn all of humans into psychers so that they could protect themselves against the denizens of the warp. And now that's happening, and Call currently is stitching up the Cicatrix Maledictum with the help of the Necron Pylon Network. So they're going to, if the story progresses this way and doesn't have just like a giant roadblock, the Emperor is going to retro-engineer... Oh, and the Emperor is actually active nowadays. But the Emperor is going to retro-engineer the Necrons technology using Belisarius' Call to do it, and to just close the Eye of Terror. Like...
Ooh, that would be fun.
Yeah, just shut the door on the demons and just be like, go away. And anytime a warp storm appears, they can simply bring a pylon that they've built over to the warp storm, activate it, and shut off the warp storm. So demons will only be a minor occurrence instead of a major threat to the galaxy. That's the way the story is currently going in 40k, and I really like it. I also like that Gilliman is actually a good guy. I like that there are definite good guys and bad guys in 40k now. Because I hated the whole everybody is evil and the Imperium is actually just a bunch of tyrannical Nazis, which was true for their founding. All the way up until about 5th edition, that was true.
Man, they're regretting that so hard these days.
Which is why they go out of their way to show that the High Lords of Terror are a democracy, and that the Imperium is actually a feudalistic empire that runs with planetary governors controlling each and every single each and every single planet that they have, and now they respond to the Space Marines that are assigned to those sectors, and then those Space Marines send it back to other Space Marines who are in charge of the entire sector, and then they send it back to the High Lords of Terra. So it's a lot of telephoning, but it's more unification. So in other words, like the Ultima Segmentum, you would have all the 500 worlds having a planetary governor, and they would all run it the way that they want to run it, paying tithes, of course, to the Imperium. But then each one of them would report to the chapter master of the Space Marines assigned to that sector, which is the Ultramarines, and the Nova Marines, and the Marines, another Ultramarine successor. They report to those Marines, who then report to the one in charge of the sector, which I think is Azrael, or it's either Azrael or it's Dante. I can't remember which side either of them are on, so I forget. Please forgive me. And then they send it to Guilliman and the High Lords of Terra, and then the High Lords of Terra then have to send ships and things needed to go to certain locations, and they approve things and are actually doing their job instead of just trying to make ridiculous laws to kill everybody. Yeah, the Siege of Terra books are amazing. The new lore for 40k, absolutely incredible, and I so love the fact that GW has become aware of what their universe has become and is changing it by introducing Guilliman, and Guilliman is just making changes to the Imperium.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
You have any last questions about AOS for now?
I really want to finish painting my freaking AOS army at some point.
Yeah, I am also. I just finished setting up I bought some new lights so I could start streaming, because I saw they're bringing back, the tournaments are starting to start up again. It's like I'm trying to get my Night Haunts ready, because I really want to go to that Games Workshop tournament in Austin that they announced the other day.
Now, I'm assuming, of course, you're being safe and you've already been vaccinated, so going to these events is actually safe for you.
Get vaccinated, people. Yes, I was I got my second shot back in February.
Besides, when you get the 5G inside you, your cell phone works amazing regardless of where you are.
I wish that was true. I would have paid extra if there was a version of that.
No, but it honestly, you kind of answered everything that I had. Morathi is a giant jerk that tries to sleep with things and give it tummy aches.
Yep, and I will actually be diving into Morathi lore soon for one of the big character cover videos. Probably won't be still for like months, but it's on the docket at least.
You know what? I have a sheet upon sheets upon sheets of paper of things that I want to do and things that my wallet says that I can do.
Yeah.
And, plans. And,
yeah.
Plans upon plans. Sitting here. Kind of sucks.
Yeah, like I need to find someone to paint my Velocore model, because I don't want to paint him because I'm not going to use him. He's just going to... I wasn't even going to get one. I went into like my local store to grab something, and they just had one sitting on the shelf, and I was like, how do you have this?
Yeah, at that point you just
I thought these were all gone. Yeah, they were like, oh, yeah, we had an extra one in the back. And I was like, I guess I'm buying it.
Yeah, no, I would do the same thing. I work at a game store, and they told us flat out that we can't buy the Velocore because they don't have enough for the customers. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. And I also donated, I'm sure you saw this, I donated my Cursed City to my store so people can just go in and play it.
Yeah, man, that was super generous of you.
Yeah. No, it's like
I would not have done that. I'm too selfish.
I enjoy games, but I enjoy seeing people play games more than I enjoy playing games by myself.
I'm super excited to play Cursed City. I dropped it off with a painter who specializes in like painting a lot of models very nicely but very quickly.
Also,
I think he's almost done.
One of the funniest things about Cursed City, do you know the werewolf that's in it, the big werewolf?
Do you mean Radikar or the Vargskier?
The Vargskier.
Yeah,
you know
what
what that name translates to, right?
I do
Wolf
not.
cheese.
I mean,
his name is Icelandic. It is great.
I'm still so salty that they don't have like if you want to run any of like the cool Cursed City characters on tabletop for like normal play, you have to run like them all. They don't have like individual rules, but I know a lot of people are just running the Vargskir as a Vargulf, so it's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's
basically the same model. It's just nicer looking.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It is. Oh, those models are beautiful.
I'm so excited for the new vampires. Like, I'm gonna be at my store on Saturday at opening, so I can just get in the pre-order line.
Right. But
mommy of nightmares, let's go.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you for coming on to the channel. If anybody wants to see your channel, where should they go?
You could just go to youtube.com/loremaster of Sotek. I think I have that URL working.
Is there any other social media you're on?
I'm on Twitter, but it's just me bitching on there. So, just if you like that. But I also stream a lot on Twitch, which I just found out that you're on Twitch too. So I'm going to have to do my best to catch you in a raid.
Yeah. So thank you for joining me. As always, it's been amazing. So much AOS lore.
Yeah, I am. I love talking about it. It's a super exciting narrative, even though it's virtually impossible to keep up with. But yes.
Anyway, guys, thank you for joining us. Leave your comments in the comment section down below. I'm pretty sure both of us will be down there answering any and all questions that we can find. As always, I'm NornQueenAlexis. Love you guys. Bye.